So I always give it just a minute. All right, we are live. I am John Soner. I'm a volunteer at the Diana Initiative, and I'm really excited for the webinar that we have for you today with all these wonderful experts on it. I would like to thank our Career Village sponsor, Nuvik, this year. Just a reminder, the Diana Initiative is on Monday, 7 August. So we sort of are kicking off Hacker Summer Camp this week. So I hope to see you there. I will be at some other events as well throughout the week. But with that said, we're excited to hear from all of these amazing experts today. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to kick things off, and I will pop up maybe later and say hi. So Sarah, over to you.
Cool. Thank you, John. So hello, everyone. Good morning, if you are on our side of the world, and good afternoon, good evening, if you're kind of on the other side of the world, or wherever you are. Yeah, we've got a really cool panel here today of some very wonderful women who are we're going to talk about research. And to be honest with you, I'm probably like the least experienced person in here on this front. There are people who do way more than me. So I'll introduce myself, and then we'll go around the room, let everyone introduce themselves, where you're from, what do you do, and yeah, what do you do in research. But my name's Sarah Young. I am a cloud security advocate at Microsoft. I'm based in Melbourne in Australia, so it's Sunday morning here, I do security things. I do a lot of talking about security. I've done a little bit of research, and I spend a lot of time talking to communities and doing fun things like that. So I'm going to pick, because I don't know the order. I say around the room and I don't know the order everybody's on screen. So I'm just going to call people out. I'm going to go down from my screen. Shanna, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure. I think it's the same on my screen too. You're up there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm Shanna. I am primarily working in digital forensics and incident response, and that's sort of my research passion as well, in terms of, what we're going to talk about research and the different styles of research. I do some security research in my role at the moment. I work for a small company called CoSiv, so I do some security research there, which can be very frustrating at times. I think it's probably something we'll talk about, where research can be fun, but it can also be hair pulling out. Yeah, I'm pretty bad at doing the introduction of myself, so I'm going to pass on now to Lidia, who's that way, actually.
This way. Oh, thanks, Shanna. Thanks, Sarah. I concur. I also suck at introductions, so I'll do my best. Currently security architect, been previously a security engineer, analyst, all of the above. In terms of the research space, I've done the whole university thesis dissertation thing, so hopefully I can shed some light into that. Previously, I've presented new research at conferences like Black Hat USA, Sector, and Erica sporting the beautiful KawaiiCon t-shirt at her conference as well. So that was amazing. I'm also very present on Diana, so I'm part of the review board, and I've spoken twice at Diana presenting new research there as well. Over to Erica.
Yeah, thank you. So hey everyone. I'm Erica Anderson. I am the COO and co-founder of a cybersecurity technical training company called SafeStack. But I refer to myself more as a huge security nerd because I've done heaps of things. In the past, I've done security engineering, security analyst work, spent a bit of time in incident response and managing incident response teams, yeah, doing a little bit all around the place for the past couple of years. And yeah, in terms of security research and what I do, a lot of what I do is trying to get everyone who's involved in building software, not just developers, but everyone knowing what they should do in security. So a lot of my research comes from trying to understand and research more about their worlds and how we can kind of teach them about the stuff in security to try and make sure that they're all doing their part as well. So that's largely where my part of research tends to come in nowadays. But it's been varied over the past couple of years. So over to Pam.
Thanks, Erica. I'm Pamela O'Shea, based in Melbourne as well. I'm director of Shea Security here in Melbourne. We focus on penetration testing, but we also do research as well. So a lot of my stuff these days is more enabling our team to do research, which I really enjoy. I have a traditional research background, a little bit like Lidia, where it's academic, back in the early noughties, which was a very long time ago, doing Ph.D. in software engineering. Since then, I've done a lot of research in software-defined radio and other areas. But that's me, and I guess I'm lucky as well. I'm also on the review boards for a lot of conferences, so I get to see a lot of new research coming in, which is really a privilege. So we've got Black Hat USA, Black Hat Asia, BSides Singapore, and BSides Canberra. So I love seeing all that research come in, and it's really, really great to be able to see that.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, we have a very well qualified panel here who do a lot of very cool things. So I'm going to just throw out some questions. Feel free, like, we can just first person who wants to grab them, fastest finger first. Why did you start? Well, why do you think cybersecurity research is important?
I'll go. Beat you, Erica. I saw that.
Go, I don't. Shanna, you spoke first. You go. Fastest finger first.
Yeah, this is actually funny because I was like, no, I don't really feel like talking this morning. And then as soon as you ask a question, I'm like, right, no. I think it's cybersecurity research, and we did talk a little bit about this just prior to the panel, just on the different forms of research. But I think that cybersecurity is something that is not very well, I'm not going to say defined, but the information out there can be hard to find. It can be in language that people don't understand. So I spend a lot of my research time in developing training materials and things like, walkthroughs. And I really enjoy doing that kind of thing. And the feedback I get is great because it's bringing it into a language that people can understand. So while maybe I'm not researching and coming up with my own, novel ideas or not creating something new, I'm creating something that a lot of people can actually then go and use a little bit better. So I don't think that I ever thought about that as being research, maybe until today. But I think there's a lot of people who provide that to the community, and it's a really invaluable thing. So that's why I think it's pretty important that we continue to do that.
Yeah, and as part of our chat earlier, I know, I believe it was you, Shanna, or Pam, but mentioning that cybersecurity is really kind of a practical domain and something, it's more of a trade, really. So research is so valuable because the way you apply it is so varied based off of, there could be technical context, whether or not it's the software or the different kind of components that you're building something with, or it could be just applying those technical things in different types of industries or different types of environments. And there's so many varied contextual components that, research could be really, really granular down at the nitty-gritty detail, or it could be more principle-based, and it really kind of spans that whole I don't know, spectrum. So I think, yeah, whichever of you said it was a trade or a practice, I think that's absolutely spot on.
I'm like, who's going next? Who's going next? Like, Lidia, you look a little bit like you're looking like you're coming off mute.
I can come off mute. I thought that what they answered was fine, and I was going to go, Sarah, next question. But we can certainly answer that.
Well, Lidia, you do lots of things. What do you like? And you do all kinds of things in research, and you've done your own. So, what do you think about the types of research? Because, like I said, there's many of them, right?
Yeah, and I sort of tend to echo what Shanna said as well. And we had this discussion in the pre-meet before. There's so many different types of research, and Pam mentioned that there's the academic side, and I think that needs to be geared towards one way. There's also obviously sharing your own experience, which I think is really, really, really invaluable because, as Shanna said, you're relating to, again, a different type of audience, and you're able to help uplift that audience to a level that they feel confident and perhaps can find their own way as well. And the other research that, as Pam mentioned, being on review boards like Black Hat and, even our own community conferences, we see new research coming in. People that see a gap, so you could be in a work situation and, as it was in my case, you're sitting there scratching your head going, oh, there's a problem here. No one's I can't find a solution on, on the internet, or I'm speaking to my colleagues, this doesn't exist. So you actually start to go out and find a way to solve it yourself. That's brand new research as well. So I think it's really important not to underestimate what you're doing today, be it at home or work, to problem solve something, because maybe it doesn't exist today and you're actually closing the gap on something that the community needs. So I think that's really important for you to consider as well.
Yeah, and I was going to say, whether it's offensive or defensive research you're doing in security, there's never going to be a product that comes out and says it's fixed. There's, security cross-cuts everything. It's a very broad area, from software engineering all the way down to hardware and everything in between. So we need skill sets across the whole range, and we need different levels of depth and different perspectives. Two people can look at the same research problem and look at it completely differently, and we need that as well. And I think it's good to remind ourselves that sometimes we can be scared about doing research or starting it because we don't know what the answer is. But it's nice to remind yourself that that is the whole point of research. Research is keep searching until you find the answer. You don't know the answer when you start. That's the whole point. So don't be afraid of not knowing. Just dive in, read around. There's a whole procedure, doing your literature review and all that. It's not complicated. There's a whole little methodology you can follow to get to an answer, but you definitely don't have to know the answer when you start. And that's what's nice about research. You can pick any area, even if you don't have the skills in that area, you can start getting the skills in the area first and then move into the research phase. So it's nice to remember that too, I think.
Yeah, now we have a question. So coming in on the live feed from Nicole. She asked if any of us work with the Association of Internet Researchers. Now,
good question. I don't.
No, I had actually not heard of them before. I was just looking them up on my other screen here as the question came in, which is probably what all of us were doing.
Guilty.
But no, that's really interesting. So the answer is no, Nicole, we do not. But now I'm going to learn more about them.
Yeah,
because that looks pretty cool. So look, I know from I haven't, as I said, I'm probably one of the least experienced in research in here, and I know Lydia will tell me off for saying that, but it's probably true. But I know that a lot of people think that research is something that is not a beginner topic. Like, you need to have been in security for a long time. You need to know lots, and is that true? Like, what do you do to get started? Because I don't think that is true, but I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have, is that you can't be a security researcher, or you can't do research unless you're very experienced.
Yeah, it's a loaded word, isn't it? Like security research, it's like, oh, it's a little bit daunting. And you maybe see people who go by security researchers in the community and they produce some wicked amazing stuff. And doesn't mean that, everything that must be produced must reach a particular bar. And I think that was a really good question about, are any of us associated with the Association of Internet Researchers? And, I think one of the very first good things to maybe consider before jumping into research is, what am I looking to do? What am I looking to get out of this? Obviously there's going to be associations and groups that have, perhaps like processes or standards and stuff for performing research, making sure that the outputs and the research you do reach a particular criteria, especially if it's going to be considered, academic or scientific, and it has to reach a particular bar of standards. But honestly, I mean, from my perspective of, when it comes to the stuff that I do, it usually starts off with, a question. Like, for example, the question I'm working through right now is, I work with a lot of business analysts and a lot of analysts who are wondering, what can I do for security within my teams? And of course, that question is, again, so loaded because it depends exactly on how that team functions, what type of environments that they're running in. But a lot of my research is around, researching and understanding that realm of knowledge of business analyst work, especially in like a technical or a digital team, and understanding, me knowing exactly what you need to do from an internal organization security perspective, what are things that kind of naturally overlap, when it comes to, going through risks, business analysts are really practiced in kind of going through impact assessments and risk assessments. Well, that's a really nice overlap of security risks. And that could be perhaps that domain where those business analysts can kind of support. So working and doing some research on understanding how we can kind of bring those two together, that's ultimately the question that I've set out with. But it kind of involves kind of spidering across various different sources. And of course, vetting your sources and making sure you're not going to places that are not really reputable or are just kind of, I don't know, crap. Bad, not great. But being able to kind of like vet that stuff and kind of answer that question. So the bar and the standards that I follow, it's probably like loosely kind of follows a research framework in the sense of you start out with a question, you go through and you kind of collect a whole bunch of information and research resources, and you pull together that research and you kind of test your question and you test what you've kind of set out with. But of course, my use case of applying it is different than a lot of these wicked smart people here. So not sure if any of you wanted to maybe talk through maybe how you start off your research and how you kind of handle it.
I'm happy to jump in next. I think Eric is spot on. It starts with a question. It starts with a gap. And if I sort of reflect on the research that I presented, not academic, because that's again, it's a different focus. But if I look at the conference research that I presented, it started off with me going, oh, I need to test something, but there's nothing here. I'm going to speak to this person. I'm going to speak to that person. We've got ours, but it's limited. It's not generic enough. So you start off with a problem statement, a problem that you're trying to solve that doesn't exist. And you may think it's small. I know I thought my research was very small. And I know I had a friend that turned around to me and said, this is such amazing stuff, we need to submit it to a conference. And I basically said he was an idiot, excuse my expression, because I undervalued what I was doing. So please don't undervalue. Don't be judge and jury of your own work. It is so, so, so important. Even the year that I spoke at Diana, I made a joke with Sarah a little while ago. I was speaking about some of the negativity way back when. I don't see it as much anymore, that I got in my early years of being in IT. And as I started writing my talk for the Diana Initiative, I thought, well, this is bigger than me. Let's do a survey. Very simple survey. I got hundreds of responses. There's another idea. So I'm not going to flog it to death too much, but I think it doesn't matter whether you're doing software development, if you're researching something, in an underrepresented community, or if in my case, I was researching a malware testing framework. Well, actually, I wasn't researching. There was none. So I created my own. Why? Because I wanted to be able to say at the end of the POC, this is who we select based on facts. You're just literally solving a problem, and that's research. You don't need a CVE to say, I'm a security researcher. It can be anything.
I think that's a really important point, Lydia, because I know a few years ago, I also thought that security research had to be, I'm going to demonstrate this, CVE, this hack. Like, that's all security research is. It's just finding 0 days and stuff. And if I'm not doing that, then it can't be research, which is not correct, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where we tend to say, well, if I haven't got a CVE, then that I haven't hit that bar. And we need to dispel that. I mean, we need to dispel that. You don't need to be doing that, I guess, the offensive testing to be able to say that, you're doing some sort of research. It is an element, but there's so many other aspects of it. And typically it's just to solve a gap or solve a problem that you're dealing with, be it at work or, in Shanna's space training or what Eric is doing with developers.
I would agree with that. Some of the best researchers I don't have a CV, and they could have thousands of them if they wanted. They just don't have it because they are more interested in the pursuit of the research and not just give me kudos. So I think it's good to remember that. And what Erica and Lydia have said, I 100% agree with. There's a research question and you go and ask it and you try and find out questions. And just to tie that back as well to, if I'm a beginner and I haven't done research before, but I'm kind of keen to try it out, Don't be afraid to start, because the very first step in research is doing your literature review. And we've kind of touched on that, but in academia, it's called literature review. All it means is read everything you can on the area. So pick an area you're interested in, read it all. What are all the researchers doing? But not just the current researchers. What have the ones in the past done? Because a lot of people have done amazing work in the past. And if you picked it up and continued it, or looked at it from a different angle, you would still have a little hole or a gap that you could fill. So all research is what's going on in the area, what knowledge is there, and then finding a little tiny gap that you're interested in answering. You want to be interested in it because you're going to be at it for a while. So you want to make sure it floats your boat as well. And just find that tiny little gap. It can be the tiniest gap in the world. I know for a fact that when I'm reading a lot of blogs, I like some people's writing style over another. And the blogs could be on the same content, but it's valuable to have the other blog because I understand it better from that person, or they've done a better diagram, or they've referenced something that helps me. So doing a literature review, and in stages, you can publish things. So with research, what I normally tell people who are planning it is, you don't wait till the end to publish it all at this big bang conference or anything. It doesn't even have to be at a conference. Make it a series of small incremental blog posts. So your first one could be, I'm going to read 50 blogs on this topic, and I'm going to summarize them, and I'm going to reference them. So always reference everyone's work. Don't never quote someone without referencing them. That's the big thing, because it helps other people find the original sources. That's your first output. You've got a research output. You've done your literature review. In university, they normally say be conversant in 200 authors. That's a bit extreme. You don't need to be 200 authors straight up in your exam, but you can do 50 or 100, whatever you have the time for. That's where I would start. Just read around an area, publish that first blog. It's valuable because it's your words and your perspective, and it will help someone. And then you can move on from there. While you're doing that reading, a question or a little gap might pop up that you're interested in. But you don't have to know what that is when you start the literature review. Just start. That's all I would say. And go from there.
That leads on to a really sort of the nice sort of next point in a very lovely way, Pam. Thank you. But if someone was wanting to get started or had an idea for research, how the heck do you get started? Because I think probably when I did my bit of research, I know probably for me, I was like, okay, cool. I've had this idea, but where the hell do I start? It can be a little bit overwhelming. So do any of you wonderful individuals, what are your tips for people starting if they have an idea? Or how do you get an idea as well?
Yeah, I think if you have an idea and you're starting, read, because someone else might have done it. And you don't want to spend 3 months doing something and find out that Jimmy did it 3 years ago. And it's that's happened to me as well, because there can be some obscure blog somewhere that you never saw, or some academic paper somewhere that you didn't read. So that's why you do the literature review, so you're not reinventing the wheel. You might find that Jimmy did it 3 years ago, but he didn't do it really well, or he left a gap or something. That's fine too. But just start reading. Who are the people who work in this area? What have they done? That's where I would start anyway.
Maybe can I go there, Sarah?
I'm gonna say, you go there, Shanna.
John's point, because I think it's something that a number of us are on the review boards for Black Hat around the world. And one of the things that is quite disappointing is that there is a real lack of women submitting to these conferences with research. And I don't think that it's because women are not doing the research. I think it's, as we've all alluded to, is what we do in terms of research. We don't think it's research, and we don't think it's valuable or novel or good enough to put out there. But it is. But yeah, it is a little disappointing. I'm on review boards for BSides as well here in Melbourne, and we get a lot of women who actually apply for talks at BSides, but something like Black Hat with the research side of things, there is really a lack of submissions in general. We all definitely want to see that go up.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a really good point there. It's like, because especially, you know, with running KawaiiCon and KiwiCon in the past, often the very first thing that most people, when I approach them, like, submit to us, we want to hear from you. They're like, oh, it's not novel enough, it's not new enough. Like, there's been heaps of talks on this before already, and it's like, no, but I know that you're approaching it from a different angle, and there is something special about the way that you've done it. And honestly, like, leave it, like, if you've pulled together and you've done all of the reading, and 100% to Pam's point, writing up a summary of what you've done is so amazing, because it allows me as like a reviewer or someone who's going through that research to be like, wow, this person has actually spent quite a bit of time on this. It doesn't matter, like, it's not about, you know, whether or not you're good at writing blogs or not. It's showing the thinking process and the fact that you had a question that you really wanted to work through, and you've gone through your sources and you've gone through to think through it. It's not about it being completely groundbreaking or new or something that's going to take off viral online in your community. It's you know, it's more about the fact that you found something that you wanted to do better, to learn about, and you dug into it a little bit. So 100%, don't let the fact that it doesn't feel novel enough hold you back. Do the reading, write it up in blog posts or short or threads or whatever the approach is, videos, and share it with people. Because 110%, I mean, I personally would love to see a lot more submissions from all sorts of different types of people. So yeah.
I might just
Lidia.
add on to that as well. So I think just one last thing to think about as well is that, and I'll use the Blackbird one because it's really valuable. I was not going to submit. I had someone put a gun to my head to make me submit. Even KawaiiCon, Erica put a gun to my head because I just didn't think I was good enough.
I was vaguely remembering that too. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure if I go through my Twitter, there's a lot of
Yeah.
angry DMs for me being like, Lidia.
Yeah. I don't know why we do this to ourselves, and you'll probably see me. I spend my whole life now uplifting others and letting them know that they are good enough, because you are. And we undervalue what we do. I don't know why, but I think one thing that I can encourage, especially because we're on the topic of conferences. Conferences such as Diana it's a safe space. If you've got something, you've got an idea, reach out to the committee. John, maybe we can talk about this later. I don't know if Diana this year, if we had reviews before the submission, before the abstract and the description of the talk or the presentation was submitted. But there are many conferences that will say, hey, reach out to the review board. We'll have a look at your talk and your detail before you submit, if that's going to give you the confidence to submit. I say this all the time, don't be judge and jury of your own work. Every conference is different. Every conference has got different ethics. Every conference has got a different audience. You won't know that until you speak to them. So please don't set yourself on fire before giving it a chance. Yeah.
And of course, especially with all the conferences at Hacker Summer Camp, of course, it's a big week. There's a lot of people who attend. So just if someone did submit and say they weren't selected that time, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but what advice would you give? Because I know that some people get, especially if you've really put your neck out, you know, to submit and you didn't get picked. What would you say to people? Because I also do review boards. I know Lidia will have thoughts on this. I know she will. Pam, you've disappeared. Well, maybe Pam will be back in a second. You know, I know now from being on a review board that it isn't necessarily the fact that your talk or your submission is no good. It's not necessarily. In fact, a lot of the time it isn't about the quality of your work. It's just that there might be too many on one topic, or we just don't have enough spots. And I'm going to say, Lidia, I feel like you will have lots to say on this one, especially.
I do, but I'm going to keep it short because I know Shanna and Erica are going to have some great comments on this as well. The one thing that I really want to say, it is decline, not reject. It is my absolute pet peeve. I hate the word "I got rejected from X conference." Mm-hmm. It is such a negative undertone. You know, running BSides Melbourne, I sit on, 3 other review boards, including Diana. As Sarah said, it could be space. It could be that maybe there were 10 talks on threat intelligence, and it's not a threat intelligence conference. You know, we need a balance. You know, it could be that, you know, I get an example that I had was, I had a friend of mine submit a Black Hat USA this year, amazing talk, you know, and he was just outside of the, you know, the 4 or 5 that could progress in that track. How do you tell someone that they, you know, they were so close? So it's definitely not my talk wasn't good enough, or my talk wasn't, you know, that. Some of these conferences can have 1,000 submissions. It's a lot. And they only 100, 20, 30, depending on the size, get to go on stage. So please don't feel that it's not you. It's so many other factors. I know the others have got other things to say, but my takeaway, not reject ever.
Yeah. Shanna, do you want to go first?
Sure. I was just going to say that, yeah, it can be a little bit heartbreaking. I submitted to RSA in RSA conference in San Francisco for this year, and it's the first time I felt brave enough to do it, and spent, you know, a fair amount of time on the submission and what we would be working on and what kind of research that we would be doing, and we did get the decline. What am I going to do? I'm probably going to submit it again next year. You know, like, why not? Or submit it to a different conference, perhaps. I think the actual talk, though, is sort of a little bit more, you know, focused on an RSA conference speaker audience than any of the others. But really, I mean, I have to feel confident in it is actually a good topic and it is good research. We didn't get in this year, but maybe next year.
Yeah, 100%. And just to echo exactly what Lidia and Shea were saying, for me, from running KawaiiCon and KiwiCon, there's only about 35 speaker slots that we can really give out. And when you've got hundreds and hundreds of submissions, every conference is going to run it differently. For our specific conference, we have really set values that we kind of aim for, and we aim to have a really diverse range of expertise and background, as well as discipline across security. And as well as we try to make sure that there's a few new speakers that come onto the scene to kind of give them that platform and that audience. So so there's a lot of things that it's not even, you know, necessarily based off of the outcomes of your research. So just remember, when it comes to getting declined, or when it comes to having a conference talk that maybe you've been to multiple times and you've attended and you just dream of being on that stage, don't let the decline set you back. Exactly like Shana said, you could submit the exact same bit of research. You could even take it a little bit further and probably get accepted. So don't let a decline make it be a reflection of the output of your actual security work. And highly recommend, you know, if you are feeling that way, like, please do reach out to the conference organizers and reach out to the people who are reviewing CFPs after the event, please, as a conference organizer. Maybe wait like a week or two after the event, because they'll be really stressed beforehand. But 100%, most of the community conferences, and I'm sure a lot of the like amazing CFP reviewers on this panel, I'm sure they'd be happy to kind of give you that summary of, hey, why is it that we declined your talk this year? And you might actually find that, you know, actually it was just a matter of trying to balance out the content, or is a matter of the audience and what they might have connected with the best. Or it could point out some things that maybe you can improve on for next time. For me personally, often a lot of the piece of feedback that I've given to people is, you know, you submitted you submitted your research, and it's great. I don't know enough about it in this paper. You know, do you have any blog write-ups? Do you have any videos where maybe you're talking to people about it? Have you done this talk before for a smaller local conference that maybe has been recorded before? So that might kind of give you some pointers of, okay, maybe I just need to go a little bit deeper, or maybe I need to kind of challenge the way I've done my research. What could be really good feedback to kind of work on over the next year? So yeah, those are some of my tips.
Yeah, I would say something similar as well. But also, I'd like to highlight that you don't have to present at a conference either. It's wonderful when you do, because we all love watching conference talks. But if you're afraid of presenting, don't let it stop you doing research. It doesn't have to be the the output of your research. It could be a blog. It can be something else. And if you get rejected from somewhere, it happens all the time, like Lidia said as well. Maybe it wasn't the right conference for the research. You know, maybe you submitted something that wasn't new enough for a bigger conference, but maybe you can go for a local conference, like Erica said as well. So target the right conference and the right topic. So if you're looking at software development, for example, OWASP and the other conferences are great, AppSec days and all of that. But if you're going to submit that to a offensive con or somewhere, it's not going to fit. So you got to make sure you fit the conference as well. And the other thing is, maybe your research was good, it just didn't have enough slots in the timetable to put it in. That's the other thing. And I think asking for feedback after the conference is also good. And also, get your friends to look at it, and also look at it from your own point of view. If you were running the conference and you had 500 submissions and you have to do them really quickly, why would I pick yours? Did you give us enough information? Was it just a couple of lines? Was there too much blurb of generic stuff? Make it on point. Make it enough information for someone to make a decision about what you're going to talk about and what was the audience going to learn from your talk as well. Because I know Lidia says it all the time and it's perfect. What is the audience going to learn from your talk? Because you're up there, they're going to give you their time as well. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of the I don't think I have anything new to add on what everyone said, but there are some conferences like Diana that have mentors, pre-submission mentors. So if you're new, and there are some other conferences that do it too, so go look on their websites. They will look at your submission before you officially submit it and give you some feedback. So I also do review board panels. I have coached some people myself, and I'm sure I know other people on this panel have too, about writing a submission, because if you haven't done one before, it can be there's kind of a bit of an art to it. You get better as time goes on. But if you don't, it could be you have the best talk and the best research in the world. But if you write a terrible little submission for the review board that doesn't accurately reflect what you're doing or what you want to present, you could get rejected just because you haven't quite got the skills, which are very learnable, by the way, about how to write a snappy submission. Because the problem is, as Lidia was saying, some review boards will be reviewing hundreds and hundreds of papers. And so you need a good snappy submission that will grab people's attention. And if you don't have that, then even if the quality of your work is amazing, you might not get in as well. So that's another thing. Definitely look for those pre-submission mentoring conferences as well. I think that's a really good thing for anyone wanting to start out. So I think we've sort of done the starting out thing to death. We've gone on a few tangents, but I think they've been really useful. But going back to sort of focusing on research, how would you, if you're starting out, you've picked a topic, what do you do in terms of structuring things? Because of course it is essentially a little project. What do you do? How do you structure yourself? How do you manage your time, make goals? Of course, it can be, especially because most people will be doing this often, I think, as a side thing. And it won't be your main job, I think, for the majority. What do we want to do? In our little internal chat here that no one can see, Pam is getting tagged to go first. So Pam, you're up.
Good. So hopefully I don't get another coughing fit during this one. So apologies, everyone. I had a coughing fit earlier. Structuring your research. I think it's really important to structure it for success. Research is a big project. And if you go, wow, it's so big, I have to do this huge chunk of work, I'm never going to do it. Make it small little goals. So we've said it already. Start with your literature review and publish something around that. Something that's not new at all, just a summary of the blogs. Then find out what you want to do. You don't have to know when you start. And go, right, I want to do that. Okay, so I need to learn a new skill to answer that question. Go learn that skill and then come back to it. So structure it in ways that you've got very achievable outcomes over a period of time, but do it in such a way that you're going to succeed. So if you've got a job and you've got a home life and you're busy and you've got all these commitments and you can give it 2 hours a week, 1 hour a week, 5 hours a week, whatever that commitment is, but put it in your schedule and make sure you do it each week. But don't make it this thing where, oh, I'm going to do 8 hours, but you're never going to be able to do 8 hours. Just be very realistic. You can always improve it later, add to it later if you need to, but start with something you can really achieve and break it into very small goals. And lots of outcomes. When I was doing my research in 2002 in university, they gave us excellent advice when we were starting grad school. They said, don't wait until your thesis is published, written in draft format to show us your research. Write each chapter along the way and publish each chapter, and then your thesis becomes a series of published chapters, which I thought was great advice, and it breaks it down. So then the literature review is a published chapter somewhere. Then the next phase, a survey, like Lidia said, what is this really a problem? I should ask people, how do they feel about it? You have qualitative and quantitative research. You can gather all sorts of metrics or qualitative word data as well, and analyze it. So move on then into your question, and that might have multiple angles to it and so on. Lots of little stages, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and keep it within what you can give it. Don't say, I'm going to do 12 hours a week if you can't do 12 hours a week. It's fine to do one. It's fine to start with 15 minutes, whatever it is. That's what I would say anyway.
I'll go next. You want me to go next? I can go next. Oh, you're on mute. Sarah's on mute.
Doing well, doing well. I was just about to say Lydia. So there you go. Well done for either lip reading me or just reading the chat.
No.
Lydia, you have obviously you've done a lot of research as well. So what do you say in terms of especially the documentation side of things?
Yeah, and I'm going to echo Pam, and I think Shanna and Erica are going to be able to echo this same thing. It's the bite-sized chunks. So if I look at the master's thesis that I wrote, because that was on distributed databases, I have no idea why I chose that a long time ago, but little chunks. If I look at the black hat, or it wasn't black hat research, the research that I did on malware, because it's malware testing, I did it in chunks: static testing, dynamic testing, looking for incidents of compromise and incidents of attack, and then business function sections. If I look at the research that I did for Diana, bunch of questions, but each question, when you get the results, it's a section. And so I think what's really, really, really important is that you sort of logically think about what am I testing? What am I analyzing? What's important? It comes back to the problem that you're trying to solve. So something that I'm very, very big on, and maybe it's just me, I'm quite OCD about things. I like things organized in my head. As I'm testing for a purpose, I'm structuring things and putting all the results down. So even for Diana, when I'm asking people questions about their experience in industry, it is an area of research. What happened, blah, blah, blah. And you're getting those results and you're tabulizing them. You're putting statistical analysis around it. So you're able to talk to that data. So I think what's really, really, really important is that you're able to put things into chunks so that you can really extrapolate the information and share that information accordingly. And then obviously there's other sections which we can talk about later. Definitely want to hear from Erica and Shanna too.
I don't think I have much else to add, actually. I think it's pretty well covered, to be honest.
How are you, Shanna?
I'll probably just add, because some of the research work that I do in my day-to-day job can be really frustrating. There can be days, weeks, months where I feel like I've gotten nowhere. I've got nothing to show for it. I have accomplished nothing, even though I've spent hours and hours and hours. That can be like a really bad feeling. And it can make you feel like maybe you're not good enough for it, or, there's nothing to find. But often those little gems come around and you do actually, look back over maybe your last months of work and realize, actually, I have achieved a lot. Even if it's achieving, well, that's not going to work. That's still actually achieving something, even if it isn't what your end goal is. So just being mindful that, it will be challenging at times. It's not always going to be fun. It could be boring. It could be heartbreaking. But just keep going. Just keep going and review what you've done. Look over, where did you start? Where are you at now? And are you on your way to where you want to be? Depending on how you want to, where you want this research to go. You may not want to publish it. It may be just for yourself. It may be for your work. You might be doing a blog post. You might be doing a conference presentation. Keep yourself on track by bringing everything back to, you know, a bit like Lidia said, you know, having it in a structure, and is this where I want it to be going? And if it's not, that's not a bad thing necessarily. Maybe along the way you've changed your focus, or it makes more sense to now go in this direction. But just going back and reviewing and understanding where you're going to and where you've come from will be really helpful to give you motivation to keep going.
I would like to add to that a little bit, Shanna. That's brilliant. And it's something we forget to mention sometimes around, damn, I've spent a lot of hours on this and I've got nothing to show. Or at least you think you've nothing to show, but you do. And I would like to reference a really good keynote from OffensiveCon last year. So OffensiveCon 2022. Mark Dowd spoke, and he spoke about the title of How Do I Actually Find Bugs? And it's offensive security research. But he made a really good point around, he stares at code a lot and doesn't always find a bug. But he said, I learned how they wrote that particular part of the system, or now I'm familiar with that software. And if a change happens in the future, I can come back to it and I'm familiar with that software. So that's an outcome. Just being familiar with something, or learning how a software engineer wrote something really well. So that's also good. So make your research measurable and positive. So you didn't find anything, but now you know how this thing works. It's kind of a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah. You're so right, but I know how disheartening it can feel if you feel like you haven't made something tangible when you know you have. In terms of, if we're looking at and this, I don't know, I'm picking on Pam always, but because Pam does a lot more academic, is that academic lady, but in terms of if someone's doing some research and they're wanting to sample things and make metrics, it's that quantitative. I had to think for a minute. I was like, which word is that begins with Q? The quantitative metrics that you might derive from some research. How would you do that? As we said, you know, not all security research has to be exactly scientific. It doesn't need to be, you know, for a PhD or a master's, but, you know, obviously the methodology is still quite similar, whether or not it's going in an academic journal or not, right?
Yes, for sure. So there's lots of ways you can measure things, and it doesn't always have to be numeric or easily measurable things. So, for example, if you're looking at some source code, you can get a lot of GitHub metrics. Is this where the software bug happens? Is it a busy area of the code? Is it a new area of the code? Is it a frequently patched area of the code? Is it the developer that always makes mistakes that checked it in? There's all these things you can measure automatically with a script, for example. Then there's the other side of it is, let's go talk to dev teams and go, how do they feel about it and when the bugs happen? So you could write a survey depending on it, but you need to be objective. And there's loads of books out there on how to do proper research in terms of sampling, making sure that you've got, you know, your control group and everything. It's all pretty standard stuff, but you can get at your answers from multiple ways, and it doesn't always have to be like figures and numbers and statistics. It can be talking to people. Anecdotal evidence is just what it is. It's anecdotal. It's like, I think this or someone thinks that, but you can expand that out and make it more scientific by asking lots and lots of people across lots of industries and domains, and increasing your sample size up, trying to get the errors down. So all that's doable as well. I would not be too narrow-minded about how you answer your questions. So yeah, and if you're really interested in research, there's plenty of methodology books out there as well, because we could have a whole day on methodologies, but they don't have to be too complicated. But, you know, not everything is just because you can't measure it with a number or an automated script doesn't mean it's not measurable. You can talk to people and you can structure your research to get an answer as well.
Yeah. Now, Lidia, I know that you were doing scripting when you did you did a lot of scripting when you did some of your research. Do you want to share with the group? Because I know we have talked about this in the past.
Yeah, so I think when I started doing the malware research, I think I tested up to 80,000 pieces of malware, and again, undermined completely what I did because I did it as a script. But I did it as a script simply because I had other things to do with my time.
Well, I
Um,
don't think 80K is a lot. I don't,
Well-
80,000. I'm not sure you could have done that manually.
No, but I'll add some context, and it actually goes to what Shanna was saying before. Pivoting is such a good thing. Sometimes stuff happens and you go, what the heck just happened there? So I wrote a script because I had a deadline. I had to make sure that I had a result of which vendors were doing what they could do, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't have time to test copious amounts of malware. So I started writing batch scripts. I learned how to write PowerShell. I started doing it in Python. I just did whatever I could to just automate it. And because I did that, I started finding that the vendors couldn't see that I was running the malware through a script, and they were blind, and therefore I brought all the agents down. So I found a new vulnerability. Now, as Pam said, you don't get a CVE for those things. I didn't care, but I was able to go back and help the vendors uplift their software. But that was the point. I did it because I had a lot of questions. As we kept talking, a lot of questions that I wanted to ask. Okay, so if we've got a piece of static malware that's coming via email, USB, we've copied it over, is the effects different? So it's a metric. I'm checking the outcome of a different method of downloading malware, as an example. And because I didn't want to walk away, because I'm very pedantic, I'm like, I can't just say I tested 5 pieces of malware. That's just not great research. I've got to test a lot. And so that's why I did scripting, to obviously automate it. And to Pam's point, it doesn't necessarily, it could be even, other things. There was a gentleman that I was through the Black Hat mentoring or coaching program. He was testing bulk pull requests. So bulk pull requests to be able to remediate vulnerabilities in code quickly. And he did it all via an automation script. And his script even said, if your code has got tabs or small indentations or spaces, it was able to pick up for that. And he did it all via automation. So he was able to do quick searches through GitHub, look for vulnerable code, and then send an email out to say, your code is vulnerable. And if you're a developer doing it this way, this is what it should look like. So it didn't mess up their code either. So this value, I guess, just in automating things, because it's faster, it's more efficient, less errors, and all the other benefits, above.
Now I'm gonna that we talked quite a bit about quantitative. Let's see if I can do the words that right. But how about qualitative research? Because Erica, I know you talk to a lot of devs, and that's probably more. I feel like you've done more of this. Like how and Pam touched on it before about being able to survey people, but I feel like you'll have more to add here.
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to, I do the same thing too, Sarah. I'm like quantitative, qualitative. Which one is one with words?
Which one is it?
Which one's numbers? Yeah, a lot of my research tends to kind of focus more on the qualitative side, because mostly the research that I do is very much trying to find where people in their own disciplines, in their own technical disciplines of either it's development or it's software testing or it's designing systems, whatever that might be, they have their own discipline, but it's trying to communicate some of the security things that they can do so they can build better things. So my whole world of research is largely focused on qualitative. And I think the most valuable thing about that is that when it comes to trying to learn how to connect those two things together, often you need to understand and research their world as well, and to understand the methodologies they follow or the workflows that they follow, the terminology that they use, some of the factors that they're up against when they're doing their technical discipline. As someone who's spent a lot of time, especially in incident response and more on the defensive side of security, a lot of times we find really amazing offensive security findings, and we find lots of technical bugs or vulnerabilities. And often the advice on fixing it kind of comes down to a really simple, just patch your things, or just don't use this particular vulnerable component. And a lot of it is summarized in really general ways, but it kind of causes a bit of a rift between those two communities, because often the context of how they got to that point, or the people who use those vulnerable components, or the people who use that kind of vulnerable software, there's other factors that they're kind of up against. So a lot of what I do is trying to spend a lot of time researching what are the things that those people are up against. And often, I mean, I tend to kind of, since a lot of the research I do is tending to be a bit more broader, I kind of keep it more of the principle, kind of at the principle high level. But, you know, when I was spending a lot of times working alongside dev teams, it was kind of really getting into the, okay, from my research perspective, I'm going to spend a lot of time, you know, perhaps looking through their documentation, reading through and understanding how they work. What are the different factors or the things that they're up against from the business side of things that influence how they do their development? You know, I might suggest to them that, hey, why don't you just simply embed this tool as part of your CI/CD pipeline and on you go? But actually, perhaps there's some things that I've learned through my research that, well, actually, they can't do that because of the, you know, there could have been various things that kind of prevent them from getting to that point. So from my qualitative side, I tend to do a lot of research to understand the kind of the external discipline that I'm trying to learn more about, because I'm really wanting to kind of apply my security knowledge and understanding in different types of domains. So spending a lot of time reading their documentation, understanding how, frankly, how they talk, like what is their language, how do they work, and talking to them as well. And that's kind of how I tend to do a lot of my research. So lots of communication, lots of documentation reading, and frankly, lots of learning that makes you feel very I don't know, impostery syndrome, because you're like, I'm a technical person, but I'm reading this documentation from this software testing teams and I have no idea. But, you know, through reading and through studying and through talking to these people, you start to understand a lot more, so that you can kind of really find where those natural crossover points are.
Yeah. And what I think this is a nice move into what skills, again, for people watching, what skills do you think are most valuable for research? You know, obviously reading, things like that, but I feel like there's probably a lot of skills that people don't necessarily think of that are useful. Shanna, you're giving me a big smile, so I'm gonna let you go first. You have this knowing smile.
It wasn't really a knowing smile. I was just laughing at the comment of, you know, reading being one of the obvious skills. And I think it's.
So.
I'm trying to think of the correct word here, and it's not patience. It's persistence, I think. You know, like, I don't think that there are most of the technical skills, scripting, things like that, you can learn as you go through and as you need them. But I think some of the skills around just having that persistence to keep going is probably number one. You know, if you're going to get bored of research, maybe it's not for you. It can be a bit boring, but yeah, persistence.
Yeah, and I think it relates to something that Pam, I think you mentioned at the start, but you have to be interested in your subject matter. I mean, of course, if you're doing research because it's part of your job and you don't really have a choice, well, I'm sorry. But for the other stuff, that if you're doing research as part of a kind of a side project or for your own interest, being interested in that outcome or interested in that subject matter is so interesting, because yeah, I can be very persistent for things and, you know, focused and work on subject matters I'm really interested in. But if it slightly changes, I just have no motivation. And I might reread the same piece of research like 10 times. And I'm like, this is not, there's no committing of knowledge to memory.
That's true. And I also think just having an open mind and being curious and not having an agenda as such when you start, or be willing to re-question things as you go through it as well. Because if you think you know the answer, then it's not going to be science. It's going to be some biased outcome. So go in with an open mind and lots of, you know, hope that you're going to find something interesting. I think that is really good skill to have. The other thing I would say is objective in terms of research is bigger than you. It's not about you. You're more the instrument of the research. You see a lot of people who go, submissions that come into some conferences sometimes, and they go, well, I think this and I think that. Well, it's not really about what you think. What's the evidence? What do other developers think? What do engineers think? What does the community think? Give us the numbers. It's not just about a personal opinion. So do you have support for that opinion that you have? It's okay to say, I think this based on. 12,000 people say the same thing and 8 people say the other thing, then okay, that's pretty good. But just don't go around with, I think this and I think that. So I think a good skill is keeping science as your companion and sample size.
Makes sense. Oh, Lidia.
I was just going to add one quick thing. It's actually just adding on to what Shanna said, persistence, but patience, because sometimes research can take months. And echoing what Erica said, if you don't have the stamina to keep going and the desire and the interest, it can fade away pretty quickly. So really make sure it's something that you love and something that you're curious in, because it'll drop by the wayside. Really just keep it up. You can do it.
Yeah, and the other good thing to remember is all the researchers you see up on stage, and they have their moment. It's the glory moment. But they spent 12 months miserable in their study at home going, I don't know what I'm doing, or this is terrible, or I'm not out with my friends down the pub because I'm doing this. That's all reality as well. So the glory thing is just like 2 seconds. The rest of it is the long slog.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's easy to forget that, right? Because you just see the thing that you see is the person up on stage doing the talk, and not all the stuff that's come before.
And they're up there because they weren't out partying. So it's not like you're partying and doing research and doing this. Like, you can't do it all, right? So it's just choose something, or choose the ratio that you want.
Yeah. So in terms of choosing like a topic, say we've already talked about, that some people may already have an idea and something they're interested in, but if you, or maybe you have a number of topics and you don't know which one to pick, what would be the advice you would give to someone, trying to narrow down the topic that they're going to do their research on?
I'll jump in. I find this is probably the hardest part, and it echoes what Erica said earlier about people submitting to conferences, and I don't have anything to talk about. I have nothing. If you're looking to do some research and you really want to create something, I suggest like talking to peers, other people, maybe do, like what Lidia did, a bit of a survey, and see if there's a problem area within your general area of expertise. Is there something that is consistent across everyone who's working in that industry that might need fixing? Because it could give you a good sort of area to then focus on. I did previously work for a vendor, and the founder of that particular vendor was talking about his idea came from looking through some of the problems that they were having in the US Department of Defense, things that they were looking to solve, or they didn't have the technologies right now that solved that particular problem. So he was researching his research topic, I guess, looking at what were the problems that needed to be solved for a large amount of people. And that's where this particular vendor came from. So, looking at what problems could be solved might be something that could give you a leg up in terms of what topic you might want to look into.
Yeah, I'll echo that. A lot of the research that I've done has usually kind of been based off of maybe the security discipline that I was working in at the time. Like, back when I was doing security engineering work, the platform that my employer was based off of was AWS. So actually a lot of my security research at the time was kind of very much focused from a defensive point of view, but very specific on AWS. So I kind of followed a lot of security researchers that kind of specialized in that. I kind of looked at what they were doing. I was looking at maybe some of the problems or some things that we were trying to do on our team, and stood up some, demo and sandbox accounts, and just kind of found my way to various things that were kind of where that nice overlap of helping me learn things that were really important for what I was doing as part of my job, but also trying to kind of do something new or different or interesting. When I was working in incident response, it was usually a lot of stuff around threat intelligence, usually around very specific campaigns or very specific things that were targeting the New Zealand community, based off of a lot of the reports that I was kind of seeing. So, if there's a particular discipline or area of security that you're working in, that can also be a really good start. Picking a topic, perhaps reading through some people that are already doing research in that area. My memory is mush this morning, but back when I was doing AWS security, there were some fantastic, amazing people that were doing stuff in there, but don't let their great conference talks or great research put you off, just because they're doing it doesn't mean that there's not room for you, but you can kind of look to them to really see how they structure things. You might learn like, oh, actually, maybe it's really good for me to set up a separate environment for this kind of thing. And perhaps there's ways that you can kind of get things set up so you can kind of create some space, and you can learn based off of people who are kind of doing that themselves. So reading up some people that are kind of in that area that you want to kind of get into and reading how they approach things, I think can be quite helpful.
Yeah, I think if you've got multiple things you're interested in, it's a good start. Choose one, because you can't do them all. And if you're brand new to research and you haven't done a lot of it before, choose something that you can achieve as well. So if you're interested in doing Java research or Golang research, but you only know Java, which is great, or you don't know Golang, do the one that you know, Java. It'll make it easier. So go with the one that overlaps with your skills the most, I would say, if you're starting out. Other than that, if you've got lots of options and a bit more experience at research or a bit more practice at it, go with what's like Shanna said, what's practical, what needs to be solved in the area. You might take a step back and go, which one of these is actually would be useful, the most useful. And I'd like to reference as well a really good researcher, James Kettle from Portswigger Academy. So the Portswigger HP Academy and the company that makes Burp Suite, and he's a Black Hat speaker every year. He's amazing. He does fantastic research, and he speaks about research. He's got a blog on So You Want to Be a Web Application Security Researcher or HP researcher. He also has spoken at the Absolute AppSec podcast, which is a great talk on research and how he does it. And he often has multiple questions, and how he chooses is because he's experienced and got a workflow set up, he will have his research questions and he will just go, I'm going to spend a half an hour on this. Do I get results? If not, I'm not going to pursue it. So he's got a very quick workflow for him, but you can hear more about that on when he speaks about it online. But it's a good way of just testing the waters. Is something really practical? Does it have application in the industry? Or is it some niche case that may be interesting, but doesn't apply to a lot of people? So these two ways to think about it.
I guess, and just from my perspective, agree with what everyone's saying. I think, Shanna mentioned that occasionally I'll do talks where I'll say to, the people on the webinar, you've got nothing to talk about, let's explore that. And I think it's really, really important, because I don't believe that there's nothing to talk about. I think everyone's got something to talk about. And whether, what Erica was saying, typically it's in your wheelhouse, your area of expertise that you could be working on at the moment, and maybe someone at, in the workplace has said, how do we solve for this? And you might go, well, heck, I don't know. It starts with an idea, explore it, and you might find that it's not being done before. Many times, I've explored, what are you doing today? What are you working on? Why are you working on that? Because we don't have a problem. Boom, off you go. Off you go, come back to me in 6 months or a couple of weeks or whatever. So we promise you there's something there for everybody. Look deep within yourself. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be at a level that is unattainable. Start small. Diana's the perfect place to feel safe and present and share your research and, and get it kick-started.
Well, I think we've had a good old we've covered off a lot of stuff in the last hour or so. And I think there's heaps of good advice there for anyone thinking of starting out in security. But guess just sort of as we sort of bring this kind of to a conclusion, I just wanted to do like around the room and ask all of you, if you had one piece of advice for someone, someone who's thinking about getting into research, particularly maybe someone who's not feeling very confident, what would it be? I'm going to go to my left. Well, my left, Shanna.
To me again. I think it's just what we talked about. Start small. Find something small, something that you're interested in, even if it's not something you're going to go public with. Just dip your toe in the water with something small and something that you can achieve.
Cool. Lidia.
I don't think I've got one, just one. That's tough. On the spot. Oh, I don't know. Be curious. Enjoy it. Don't be scared. Just have a go. There's so many people. Like, reach out to us. Come and talk to us. We're all so approachable. Don't look at someone in security as someone who's untouchable. We're all here. We're all part of the same community. So ask lots of questions, and we're all here to support each other. So, I don't know.
That's good. I'm going to go my up. Well, I don't know how this will appear on the recording, but Pam.
I would say stick at it, because it's going to get, like Shanna mentioned, it's going to get tough. It's going to get boring. It's going to get annoying. All of those things. Just keep doing it. So set a percentage of your week or your month, whatever it is, to research, and it's your time. Don't give it to someone else. So you might have to say no to other things, like your friends down the pub, or someone's asked you to do something else. Say no to that so you can do your research. Make it important for you, and just stick at it. And it doesn't have to be amazing results straight away. Just keep doing it.
And then lucky last, Erica, can I do the point? There we go. The point, kind of.
Hello. My final takeaway would be, get involved in your communities as well. So even if you might not be wanting to reach out to us, there's going to be people in your communities, whether or not that's local, or if there's like Discord servers or different types of online communities. No doubt there'll be lots of different groups at DIE Initiative as well. Find your people, talk to them about what you're thinking about. Hype each other up. If you've got a friend who's like, I don't know if I want to really do this, hype them. Tell them, yes, the world needs this, and be that that positive energy that people need to kind of get started. But I often turn to my communities. I turn a lot to the people on this screen when I'm perhaps feeling that bout of imposter syndrome. And it kind of really helps to have people that can kind of really help you push through some of those really difficult moments through research, where maybe you're feeling a bit down, or a bit like, maybe you didn't necessarily get to the point where you really wanted to get to. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and just keep moving. And turn to your community to kind of give you some of that support and coaching. So that's my advice.
And so I'm being reminded that I have to also have a last bit of advice too. So mine would be probably not that different to what's been echoed, throughout this whole discussion. But you do have something to talk about. Everybody has something to talk about that is valuable. It might take you a couple of goes to work out what that is. You might have a couple of false starts. Like Pam said, you might find out there's an obscure blog that someone's actually done it, but that doesn't mean you don't have something, and it's all a bit of trial and error. And don't be disheartened by, let's call them like small speed bumps. Like, it's not a brick wall, it's just a speed bump. Keep going, be persistent. That's what I would say anyway. I know at the beginning of your career as well, when you're earlier on, like these sort of speed bumps, these setbacks can feel so much harder as well. Whereas kind of with time, you get better perspective on it. So if nothing else, if you're early in career and you want to do this, still keep going, reach out to people, so they can help you get a perspective on it, because it's probably not the end of the world, if your talk gets turned down or whatever. So that's what I would say. And with that, I guess, thank you so much, panel members. I'm going to hand back over to John, who is really who is actually master of ceremonies, not me. So yeah, John, over to you.
No, thanks, Sarah. I just wanted to thank everybody for your time today. I found this to be very valuable. This is up on YouTube, so if you didn't catch it live, we'll be able to share this. I hope to see some of you maybe during Hacker Summer Camp in Vegas this year. I know, Sarah, you'll be there for our Career Village. Like, come meet some people early if there's some early morning people. We're on Monday, 7 August in person this year for the Diana Initiative. We have a lot of great stuff going on. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors at the Diana Initiative. We obviously couldn't have this conference if it weren't for our sponsors, especially our Career Village sponsor, Nuvec. And thank you all for your time on your morning, my evening. This was really fantastic, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.